another video on my channel. My name is Gregoria, also known as G, and I am a spiritual teacher and mindset coach. And here on this channel, we talk about all things esoteric, mysticism, laws of the universe, and everything in between. So I am so excited to be delivering this video today. It's something that I've been preparing for a while because I wanted to make sure that I could best articulate it in a way that it can be received by you. I'm going to be honest, there is so much more that I could be talking about, but I thought for the sake of keeping this short and sweet, that I would limit what I actually share with you in regards to this topic. And I have also decided that I will also create a part 2 because of the density of this particular topic. So today we're going to talk about all things shadow work. And the reason why I think it's incredibly important to talk about shadow work is because I see a lot about shadow work written online or posted about online or shared online, and I also see very often its attachment to the identity of trauma. Trauma and shadow work are two separate things. They are correlated at times, but they are not always. Like all my work, there's no methodology on how I'm going to deliver this. It's just going to be more so a train of thought, and you're going to come along with me. So we'll start at not necessarily the beginning, but basically understanding what shadow work is, and then I'll transition through a number of topics and even circle back around a few times to deepen your understanding of shadow work. And if you're still here listening to this intro, it means that you're very curious on how shadow work applies to you in your life. So we're going to talk about what it is, basically how you can get started on shadow work, its relationship with trauma, and basically understanding shadow work on a much deeper level than what is usually articulated online. So to simplify, your shadows are basically what you don't want to look at. Okay, there are the parts of you, especially when you're going through your spiritual awakening and your spiritual journey, even a seasoned spiritual veteran. And I've got a post coming out soon that talks about spiritual materialism and spiritual elitism. So don't get too caught up on the identity of spirituality and what that means, and basically what spiritual materialism is, are people who attach to things such as shadow work or crystals or healing or any sort of possessions that they identify with spirituality. So that's a whole separate topic, but back to this topic. It's basically what we choose not to look at. It's all fun and games to look at all the fun things like the manifestation and the readings and the crystals and the, sun gazing and the meditation and everything in between. But when it comes to actually reflecting and looking at the parts of us that feel uncomfortable, it's usually something that we try to avoid. So basically, I'm going to pose this question. Can you love your shadows, also known as darkness, but how I prefer to put it is your resistance to light. Basically, where you're resisting the light, the parts that feel uncomfortable. And they feel uncomfortable because we have misguided beliefs attached to those experiences, which evoke certain emotions which feel uncomfortable. They essentially feel like discord or discomfort. And because they feel uncomfortable when we bring them up to our conscious awareness, we avoid bringing them up, having to deal with them and work on them, because the immediate emotional response is one of discomfort. So if I were to basically give you a quick rundown on where shadows present themselves in your experience or in your life, I would basically point at these number of things. 1, addictive behaviors. Where in your experience do you have addictive behaviors? Whether it be to substances, whether it be to people, to things, to feelings, to outlets, to relationships. There are certain addictive behaviors and patterns that we have, and this is often a sign of where we have shadows. Also, unserving patterns. What patterns do we continue repeating over and over again that are really unserving? So, for example, a really good example are relationship patterns. If we keep going for toxic people or toxic relationships, that can shine a light on some shadows that we have or inner demons where we really need to bring it to the surface and look at it and observe it from a loving place. Also, certain emotions, often low vibrational emotions as well, but can also be high vibrational emotions that are masked for lower vibrational feelings. For example, when I refer to the person who makes everything a joke, and that's to hide his feelings, his deep feelings, he or her real feelings within them, right? So it's like the jokester tends to be someone who's covering an emotion. So although it's perceived as a high vibration or high vibratory emotion, it's masking something a lot deeper than that. But other emotions are things like rage, anger. So a lot of these emotions tend to be impulsive, okay? So rage, anger, manipulation, jealousy, envy, selfishness, obsession, greed, emotionally detached or unavailable. This is a really important one because we don't often look at this as something that is a shadow self, but it is because it hides something deeper than it. Lust, deceit, they're all signs or emotional signs that we have shadows that we need to basically bring to the surface and work through. Certain thoughts, so we have the emotions, and often those emotions are attached to certain thoughts. So there are certain thought patterns that you have that basically suggest that you have shadows that need to work on. Also, things that we suppress. Now, this is one that's often overlooked. The untapped, unclaimed, unseen potential that lives within us. And we deny it because we have all of these layers on top of it telling us that it can't happen for us. So for example, things like passion, courage, confidence, faith, ambition, talents, creativity, leadership. If we suppress those feelings within us, often that is because of the shadows that are casting basically their shadow upon them. So the thing is about shadows, when we choose to deny our shadows, we simultaneously choose to deny the ability to understand them. And they're not something to be afraid of. And when we deny our ability to understand them, it usually manifests in physical symptoms, relationship issues, or amplified projections of these shadows. What happens is when I deny them, often what happens is I create them into large monsters within me. And then what happens is I project them onto the world through emotions, through behaviors, through thought patterns, even dialogue with another person. And I make them so much bigger than they actually are within me because I'm denying them. Now, the thing is with shadows is they're often masked as trauma. I do feel that the word trauma is overused and it is not the same as shadows. I will talk about this a little bit later in the video, but please note that they are not the same thing. They do have a correlation, but they're not the same thing. So before I continue with what your shadows actually are, let's start with shadow work. What is shadow work? Shadow work is essentially facing your shadows and then understanding them and integrating them into your life. We need to confront the part of us that we are denying. And it's often connected to our past. It doesn't have to be. It can be something connected to an experience that we're experiencing in the present moment, but often it is connected to our past. And then we need to integrate it into who we feel we are in the present moment. Okay? Because what happens is with the shadows is we have this identity of who we were in the past attached with all of these shadows. And then we have this person that we feel we are in the present moment and we aren't able to connect the two. So we need to face the shadows instead of denying them. We need to learn to integrate them and see how they serve us in the present identity of who we are right now. Now, please know my beliefs on identity is that I don't believe in identity because it's a form of confinement. But for the sake of articulating this to you right now, identity is serving. If we don't integrate it, then what happens is it both metaphorically and physically casts a shadow over our life, which suppresses the light and denies us the ability to celebrate the true self. So here are some questions to ask yourself to know whether you have shadows that need to be revealed. What am I addicted to? What are my delusions? This is really cool because I often talk about visualization and future casting and projections and how serving it is in order for us to plant seeds of desire in order to manifest. But where are we delusional about our reality in a way that is not serving? I'm not talking about visualization where we're planting a seed of desire that is serving for our higher self and for our greater good, but a delusion that is actually quite toxic to our experience. So where are we delusional? How have I been distracting myself? I love this one. When I'm sitting down to do some work, even this video caused me a lot of discomfort because I was in the back of my mind thinking, will I articulate it in the right way? Will I say the right thing? Will I trigger anyone? Okay, so I was distracting myself from actually sitting down and recording this video. So that then shines a light on the shadows that I have within myself when it comes to talking about things that are uncomfortable for people, as opposed to just uplifting high vibrational things, right? So where am I distracting myself? What toxic people should I distance myself from? Now, please note that when someone presents themselves in our experience and we perceive them as being toxic, that doesn't mean that they are toxic people. more likely than so they are toxic to our experience. And if they do happen to be toxic people, that is just a projection of their inner shadows, and it's not necessarily who they are, because who we are, our true self, all of our true selves, is one of light, is one of love, is one of divinity. So everyone has that within them. So when I acknowledge there is something about someone else that I perceive as toxic, one, it's a mirror to me and my own inner toxicity, and two, it's because they're projecting their own feelings of disharmony onto the world. Okay, so we're not blaming anyone, but there may be people or experiences that are toxic to me personally, and I have to be able to shut that off. A really good example is a toxic relationship. You know it's not serving you. You know it's not lifting you. You're not lifting them. So why are we still in this relationship dynamic? How much have corrupt forces penetrated my life? This is a really important one right now. How much media am I consuming? How much am I listening to other people's opinions? How many memes am I reading online? How many things am I posting or sharing online that can come or may have come from corrupt sources? And am I letting that feed into my subconscious mind and plant seeds, which I then nurture through repetition and then grow into a manifestation and a projection of that corrupt ideology? What are my deepest fears? I'm going to talk about fears in a minute, but what are my deepest fears? What lessons do I still need to learn? Now, obviously, this is easier understood in hindsight. You know, oh yeah, that was a lesson I still needed to learn. How am I to know what lessons I still need to learn if I'm not aware of them? Okay, but there are some things within myself, especially if I keep repeating old patterns or old thought systems, which identifies when there is something or a lesson that I still need to learn because I have not yet, because I keep repeating it. So another good one is around money or abundance. If you keep doing all of this manifestation work or try to get yourself in harmony or in alignment with abundance and with this work, and yet you are still repeating these patterns of scarcity, there's a lesson still to be learned. How have I been ignorant? Something triggered me this morning. Well, it didn't trigger me, sorry. It brought light to something that I hadn't realized about myself. And it was talking about narcissistic parents, okay? And this therapist was talking about certain things or behaviors that narcissistic parents did. And I have a younger sister. I'm 8 years older than my younger sister. And I recall I was listening to this video, and some of the patterns that a narcissistic parent would be doing were things that I was doing to my sister when I was younger. Now, I was much younger and I was unaware when she was growing up, okay? But now I know better. And now I need to know not to repeat those same behaviors because it wasn't serving. And it was allowing me now to look at, that shows narcissistic behavior within me that I need to bring to the surface and make sure I am no longer in alignment with that. Now, I don't feel I'm any of those things right now, but there are things I still need to look at to make sure that I don't continue projecting them at all in my current experience, or especially not towards someone else. What projects haven't I finished? This is a very great identifier for shadow work. What are things that I start and then don't finish? And why am I choosing not to finish them? And obviously a big one, which again I'm going to reflect on later, is, am I a victim of trauma? Is there still a place within me that needs to be healed? Now, do you notice that that was just one question of the many? Because not all shadows come from trauma. Some do, but not all of them. A really cool quote that my friend Renee, Lady Pachamama, shared the other day, which I thought would be perfect for this video. A feeling of aversion or attachment towards something in your life is a clue that there's work to be done. It was a quote from Ram Dass. And I love that, because that's another question. What am I averting? Or where do I have an aversion? Or what am I attaching to? So two separate things. One, what am I avoiding? And one, what am I attaching to? Both cast a light on what shadows we have within our experience. Now, before I get into the depths of what the shadow is and shadow work, I want to say this. This is another really important quote. I want to talk about surrender. If you accept the pain, it cannot hurt you. This is incredibly important. This was something that I learned years ago when I had chronic physical pain, and it was terrible pain. And the moment I said to God, this was how I surrendered. I didn't say, take away my pain. I said, I allow it. I allow the pain. If it's what is for my highest good, if it's what is divinely orchestrated, I allow it. And the moment I said that out loud, and I fully and completely believed it, I allowed the pain, whatever it happened to be. I knew that my body could handle it, my mind could handle it. Within 24 hours, the pain subsided. And that was incredibly powerful for me. It was an incredibly powerful lesson, because the moment I allowed it, I knew that it could no longer hurt me. right? I was afraid of the pain. And because I was afraid of the pain, I amplified it through my thoughts and my attachments to it. The moment I said, fuck it, I allow it. I allow it to be part of my experience. I am not afraid of it. It will not control me. It no longer had any power over me, and it completely subsided. One of my favorite things to do is when terminology is used, especially in the spiritual community, but anywhere in life, linguistics is incredibly important. Where does the terminology come from? Think of the word shadow, shadow work. A shadow is literally a reflection of something that is suppressing the light. Suppressing, blocking, same thing. The shadow itself does not resist the light. Think of you and the sun behind you and your shadow. The shadow is not resisting the light. The body is resisting the light. It is the byproduct of resistance. So it's the body that's resisting the light, and the byproduct is the shadow. It is the same when we talk about shadows in the spiritual community. The shadow itself isn't resisting the light. The experience that caused the shadow is what is resisting the light. And that's often overlooked when we talk about shadow work. People are always talking about the shadow itself, but it's not the shadow. It's what perpetuated the shadow, what created the shadow. That's what we need to look at. And now a quick note on trauma. Trauma, however, is slightly different because trauma leads to shadow. Think of that analogy that I used. Trauma is the body. Okay, it's not the shadow, it's the body. And the body then leads to the shadow. So the trauma then leads to the shadow. It is an experience which causes a block to the light, a resistance to the light, which then casts a shadow. But shadows don't have to come from trauma. They can, obviously they can. And often trauma leads to shadows, but they don't always come from trauma. They can come from all kinds of places like conditioning, misguided beliefs, triggers, relationships, etc. Okay, so again, let's revisit shadow work. I'm adding layers, literally like Shrek. We're like onions, we have layers. That was a terrible, terrible depiction of Shrek. I apologize, Shrek, I love you. But there are layers, and I'm going a level deeper. So I'm basically going through what is a shadow, what is shadow work, what is a shadow, what is shadow work, what is a shadow, what is shadow work, for you to properly understand this concept. So shadow work is taking the time to observe and sit with the things, thoughts, and feelings that feel uncomfortable. And then taking the time to shift, reprogram, and reframe them. That's important. We're not just to observe them, we are then to do the work to reframe and reprogram. And that can look like questioning your subconscious beliefs, reflecting on what we hide from others and from ourselves. We hide a lot from ourselves, things that we've been denying, that we don't even want to write in our journal. So it's important to reflect on those things. What are the things I feel I should be doing, not things that I want to do? And why do I feel that I should be doing? Is it because society tells me I should? Is it because other people's opinions tell me I should? Is it because that's what is expected of me from my parents or from my community? As opposed to what I want to do, and why do I want to do them? Again, what I should do versus why I want. Even sometimes I want comes from conditioning, comes from society, comes from other people telling me I should want X thing. Please note something. When you start doing the shadow work, your ego will not want to do it. Your ego will want to reject this work because the ego's role is to keep you comfortable, and it's serving. The ego is incredibly important. Let's not deny the ego. The ego is of love just like everything else, okay? But the ego's job is to keep the human comfortable. So it will deny anything that brings on discomfort. So it will want to reject the shadow work, but sit with it anyway. I'm gonna go on a little different direction right now. You fear emotions. Think of the worst thing that could happen to you right now. Losing a loved one, a breakup, seeing your ex with someone else. The event itself isn't what you fear. Especially if you're here, I know that you believe in infinity, in divinity, in divine oneness. So what you're actually afraid of are the emotions that will follow an experience. This is important. I want you to pay attention here. So let's reframe. So the worst thing that can happen in your life is an emotional response, which is just a chemical reaction in your brain. And we have complete control over what seeds we plant in our subconscious mind, which we nurture, which lead to our perceptions of an experience, and then the emotional response that follows. The chemical reaction or emotion that follows an experience, okay, which is instinctual, lasts 30 to 90 seconds. And that's how long it takes to go full cycle. So that is an instinctual reaction. So anything you feel after that cycle is because of your thoughts. It's no longer instinctual. It is because of your thoughts and your attachments to the experience and your perceptions of them. So if we can observe an emotion and offer no resistance, no judgment, no preconceived or pre-programmed beliefs, we no longer need to be afraid of that emotion or therefore any experience. We have just collapsed fear. That's what we think of fear right now. Okay, now let's revisit trauma real quick. I know that this video has been totally sporadic and I literally told you it was going to be like a chain of consciousness because that's how my mind works and that's how I wrote my notes and that's how I'm delivering it to you. Because if we were to have this conversation in person, that's basically how I would talk to you about it. We would go from topic in and out, and that's just how the mind works. And adding these layers of understanding really does help us. And it doesn't need to be chronological, because the truth is that's not how we experience our reality. It's not, oh, this happened, then this happened, then this happened. We have to revisit things, okay? So I know that you're starting to watch this video with a shadow in mind. So every time I add a level of understanding, I know you're revisiting that shadow in order to heal it again. So it's actually quite serving to do it in this way. Okay, so the term trauma. The term trauma gets thrown around in the coaching community a lot, and it's very dangerous. Often our shadows are masked and mislabeled as trauma, but as I explained when I talked about the analogy, they're not the same thing. It's overused and it's labeled and thrown around like a play toy. And that plants seeds in people's mind. We are like sponges. Even though our hypnotic state happens between 0 and the age of 7, we now learn and program our subconscious through repetition, but the more I hear something is trauma and hear that label, the more I'm planting seeds and programming my subconscious mind. So it is incredibly dangerous to just throw the word trauma around like it is a play toy and label everything as trauma. So then people think that they need to heal from this trauma, when in fact, more often than not, it's probably not trauma at all. It's probably just a shadow that has come from something other than trauma. It's more likely to be just discomfort and discord. Limiting beliefs and perceived pain and discomfort come from trauma, but they can also come from many other places. In saying all of this, so I think it's important to add that I think that trauma is subjective, not objective. I cannot tell you what was or wasn't trauma for you. Your parents divorcing as a child can be trauma for you and not trauma for someone else. It's not universal. I also want to add, like I mentioned earlier, that labels, like identity, are a form of confinement. The moment I decide something is trauma, then it is for me. Then I amplify the need for healing and I magnify how long that healing takes, because that's what I'm told to feel and believe. When a coach labels your experience as trauma, more often than not, they amplify that experience in your brain. Now amplifying the emotional response, amplifying the effects it has on your life, perpetuating and amplifying the shadows attached to the experience. Can we see the pattern here? Let me be clear. It's not a coach's job to tell you that something is or is not trauma. And it's not their job to label your experience as trauma. That's unethical. It is their job to teach you how to identify whether an experience is in fact trauma or something else. Some coaching techniques can be more toxic than serving, and I'm not blaming any coaches. Most of the time they think they're doing something of value for you and to you. But it's important to understand that when someone else labels your experience for you, that takes away your power. Because the truth is even when you work with a coach or a therapist or a healer or anybody, the way you translate your experience isn't necessarily the exact way your body is feeling it. It's just the best interpretation that you have in the present moment, given your understanding of it. But only you yourself, through your emotions, through the way it's manifesting in your experience, can you decide whether something is or is not that specific experience. And please note, I am not discounting trauma at all. Trauma is incredibly real and needs to be acknowledged. But I am showcasing that your shadows aren't necessarily due to trauma. And I'm not going to define trauma in this video, but I will share that the emotional and behavioral aftermath of trauma tends to look a certain way. And I love this definition. Trauma has been referred to as anything that is too sudden, too much, too big for you to handle at a specific time. That is a really good definition for trauma. I feel that it would be useful for me to basically create a whole new video on trauma. If that would be something of value to you, please let me know in the comments below. And if it is, or it does get a favorable response, I will create a separate video on trauma. Basically how to understand what is or isn't trauma. And the other thing that you should note about trauma that's different to shadows is that trauma can be passed down through generations and even lifetimes. So that means that an individual will attach a shadow to the experience and how it feels in their body based on their personal beliefs, perceptions, and interpretations. All right. So even though trauma itself can be passed down through generations and lifetimes, how I choose to experience that trauma or how it casts a shadow over my personal experience is highly personal. It may be different to how my ancestors or me in a past life experienced that trauma. Okay, because it is not the same as the shadow. The shadow is what is cast because of the experience, and the experience may be trauma, but it may not be. So if you want to get started on shadow work, basically what this video was about is it was a combination of trauma and shadow. What I would recommend is you basically revisit those questions I guided you through in this video. I would take the time to look at the shadows and acknowledge where there is work to be done in your experience, and then work on reprogramming, reframing those shadows to be something new. And you can do that through affirmations, through mantras, through repetition, through meditation. There are so many different things that you can do in order to do the shadow work. Again, if you would like me to do a part 2 on shadow work, on the best ways to move through your shadow experience, please let me know in the comments below. I would love to do it. I know that this was a full-on video, and I even felt my discomfort in articulating it because I know that a lot of people may be triggered by content like this, but it's important that we're not afraid. Remember, we collapsed fear. We are no longer afraid. The moment I allow the fear, it no longer has any power over me, and I've completely collapsed the experience, because all I'm really afraid of is an emotional response, is a chemical reaction in my brain. Therefore, I have my power back. I get to control what perceptions I have on an experience. So you have your power. If you want something uplifting that will be serving, that is definitely sure to help you once you start doing the shadow work, I have a free Positivity Rampage. Links are in the description box below. Please don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to my channel. I love you so much, and I'll see you on another video next week. Peace.